the ox nodded, and that was fine. That was... that was... Insku. Datrosku, and they parted, and the donkey stood there in the late afternoon light. And he felt something in his body that he had una felt in so long he'd almost forgotten what it was felt strong. Not the desperate strength of someone pushing past their limits because they are afraid of what happens if they stop. The real kind. The rested, replenished, genuine kind. The kind that comes when a body has been given adequate rest, and adequate time and adequate care. When a spirit has been given the chance to refill rather than constantly pour out. The kind of strength that is sustainable, that doesn't need to be scraped from the bottom of an empty barrel. Weeks passed, and the valley changed not. Not overnight, not dramatically, not in a way that could be pointed to and said, this was the moment everything became different. It was gradual, the way all real change is gradual. The way it happens in the slow accumulation of small adjustments, small choices, small moments that seem unremarkable in themselves, but that, added together, shift the direction of things. The animals who had been demanding began to be less so. Some of Tim, when they could no longer count on the donkey's automatic yes, discovered that they were actually capable of managing more than they'd thought. The cow found another arrangement for a grain. The goat repaired her cart's wheels, which she should have done long ago. And the better wheels made the cart lighter and easier to pull. And for a while, she didn't need to ask for help at all. The sheep started organizing her food supply more efficiently, spacing the movements out so that each individual move was more manageable. And she found to her surprise that she rather liked doing things herself, liked the particular satisfaction of a task completed through her own effort. Not all of them learned this lesson. Some remained entitled, remained demanding, simply redirected those demands to whoever was most available, most willing, most afraid to say no. The world is full of such creatures, and they will always find their way to whatever source will fill them. But they stopped filling themselves from the donkey, and in the absence of the endless demand, the donkey had room to breathe, room to choose. Room to decide each day, based on his own energy and willingness and circumstances, whether he wanted to help, and whom and how much. And because he was choosing, his help meant something different now. When the donkey helped, it was because he genuinely wanted to, genuinely had something to give, genuinely felt the warmth of wanting to be of service, rather than the cold fear of what would happen if he was ante. And this difference, invisible to the eye, known only to the giver, changed everything about how the help landed. Gratitude came back to the valley, real gratitude, not the reflexive, automatic kind, but the kind that comes when someone does something for you that they didn't have to do, that they chose freely, that came from abundance rather than obligation. When the donkey helped, the animals he helped felt that. They felt the difference between receiving something freely given and receiving something extracted. And they responded differently. They said thank you in a way that meant something. They asked rather than demanded. They offered in return. The turtle came back on an evening in what might have been autumn, when the air had that particular quality of cooling and the light came at long angles through the trees and everything smelled of earth and change and the slow, beautiful approach of something different. He found the donkey by the river, in the same spot by the willow, but different this time. Not collapsed, not weighed down, sitting at ease, watching the water, looking like a creature who had arrived, after a very long journey, at somewhere they were meant to be. You look different, the turtle said. I am different, the donkey replied. The turtle settled beside him. They sat in the comfortable silence of two creatures who understand each other, who don't feel the need to fill quiet with noise. After a while, the donkey spoke. I still help, he said, not defensively, not as an explanation or apology, just as a statement of fact. I helped the ox last week. I helped the young rabbit family with their burrow repairs. I helped the birds gather materials for the new season. I still help. I can see that, the turtle said. But I choose it now, the donkey continued. I choose who and when and how much. And when I can't, or don't want to, I say so. And the world doesn't end. No, the turtle agreed. It doesn't. I lost some of them, the donkey said. There was a moment of something in his voice, not grief exactly, but the acknowledgement of a loss. The recognition that changing yourself always costs you something. That the price of becoming more yourself is sometimes losing the people who loved you for being less than yourself. You lost the ones who were only staying for what you could give, the turtle said. That is not a loss. That is a clarification. The donkey thought about this. He turned it over in his mind the way he turned over everything now. Slowly, carefully, giving it the time it deserved. When I was helping everyone, he said finally, I thought I was being good. I thought I was being kind. I thought I was making the world better. But I was just ... I was available, and available isn't the same as good. No, the turtle said. Availability is not virtue. It is proximity. Anyone can be available. Not everyone can be genuinely generous, genuinely present, genuinely kind. The kind that comes from strength, not fear. What I was doing? The donkey said, slowly, like someone working something out as they speak, like someone following a thread they've just found, was giving everyone else permission to take from me without limit. I was teaching them that I had no limits, and so they didn't look for them. Why would they? I never showed them I had any. Yes, the turtle said, and the sad thing is, I was angry at them for it. Somewhere underneath, I was angry. But it wasn't fair to be angry, because I had never told them no. I had never shown them where the line was. I just waited for them to notice it on their own, and they never did, because why would they? I had hidden it so well. The turtle said nothing, but the quality of his silence was the quality of someone who is very pleased with what they are hearing. I could have said something, the donkey said. Any time, any of those mornings, any of those afternoons when I was already stretched too thin and someone asked for more, I could have said, I can't today. I could have said, I need help too. I could have said, I am not a machine. He paused. I could have said no. Yes, the turtle said quietly. You could have, and I didn't. Because I was afraid. And they took advantage of the fear. Not all of them consciously. Some of them genuinely didn't know. Because I never told them. No. They sat with this for a while. The river moved past them, cool and indifferent and beautiful. A bird called from somewhere in the willow tree. So the boundary, the donkey said, is not just for me, it's for them too. It tells them who I am. It tells them what is real and what is not. It tells them that I am a creature with limits, like every other creature, and that my help, when it comes, is real. Because I could have said no, and I chose not to. Without the no, the yes means nothing. The turtle was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very softly, that is wisdom. And here is where the story and the lesson begin to blur together, begin to become the same thing, begin to speak with the same voice. Because the donkey's story is not just a story about a donkey in a valley. It is a story about everyone who has ever given more than they had and wondered why they felt empty. It is a story about everyone who has ever said yes when their whole body was saying no. It is a story about everyone who has ever built their worth on their usefulness, tied their lovability to their availability, made themselves small and endlessly capable so that others could be large and endlessly comfortable. This is a story about you, if it needs to be. And if it doesn't, it's a story about someone you know, someone you love, someone who has been carrying far too much for far too long and doesn't know how to put it down, doesn't even know they're allowed to. So let me speak to that person for a moment. Let me speak to the you who recognizes the donkey, who saw themselves in his early mornings and his endless yeses and his desperate hope that being useful enough would finally mean being loved enough. Here is what I want you to hear. You are not a tool. You are not a service. You are not defined by what you can carry or what you can provide or how much you can endure. You are a living creature with needs as real and legitimate as everyone else's needs, with limits as real and legitimate as everyone else's limits, with a right to say no as real and legitimate as anyone else's right to ask. The people who leave when you start saying no, they were never really with you. They were with the version of you that served them. And losing them is not failure. It is not proof that you are wrong to change. It is proof that the relationship was always conditional, always transactional, always dependent on you giving more than you received. And that is not a relationship. That is a contract, and you never agreed to it. It was imposed on you, gradually, in the accumulation of asks that were always answered, in the yeses that were never questioned, in the expectation that grew and grew until it filled all the space available and reached for more. You can break the contract. You can renegotiate the terms. You can decide, today, this moment, that the next time someone asks you for something that you do not have to give, or do not want to give, or genuinely cannot give without harming yourself, you will say no, quietly, kindly, without elaborate justification. Just, I can't today. Just, I'm not able to do that. Just, no. And yes, it will be hard. And yes, it will feel like you are doing something wrong. And yes, some people will be upset. Some people will say you've changed. You're being selfish. You've become someone different. And here's what I want you to say to that, either out loud or just in the quiet of your own heart. Yes, I have changed. I am becoming someone who respects myself enough to have limits. I am becoming someone who knows the difference between kindness and fear. I am becoming someone whose help is real, because I could say no and I'm choosing not to. Yes, I have changed. Thank goodness for that. Because the alternative, the staying the same, the continuing to carry what you cannot carry, the continuing to say yes when you're already breaking, that is not virtue. That is not kindness. That is not love, for them or for yourself. That is self-destruction with a warm smile, and it benefits no one in the end, not even the ones you are destroying yourself for. This is not about becoming hard. It is not about closing your heart, or becoming one of those people who never helps anyone, who moves through the world in a cold calculation of personal advantage, who has decided that vulnerability is weakness and generosity is foolishness. That is not what the turtle told the donkey. That is not what I am telling you. This is about becoming real, about having a self that is genuinely, fully present in your interactions with others. Not a self that has been hollowed out by endless giving. Not a shadow that runs around doing things for people and feeling nothing, because there is nothing left to feel with. A real self, a self that has needs and limits and opinions and preferences. A self that can say no and mean it, that can say yes and mean it, that can show up for people from a place of genuine fullness, rather than frightened depletion. Because here's the thing about helping from fullness. Here's the thing that the donkey discovered in the weeks after his conversation with the turtle. In the days of resting and choosing and working alongside the ox, when you help from fullness, when you help because you want to, because you have something to give, and you're choosing to give it. Because the person you're re-helping is someone who sees you and values you and will work alongside you. The help is different. It is warmer. It is more effective. It actually lands. It actually matters. Because both parties can feel the difference. Both parties can feel whether this is a gift or a transaction, whether this is freely given or reluctantly extracted. The donkey who helped the ox felt strong. The donkey who helped the cow day after day against his own limits. From fear, that donkey felt hollow. Same physical act, different inner state, entirely different outcome. And the people around you, the real ones, the ones who see you, the ones who are worth showing up for, they can feel the difference. They don't want your depletion. The good ones, the ones worth having in your life, don't want you to destroy yourself for them. They want you, the actual, whole, real, rested, genuine you. And you cannot give them that if you are busy giving everything you have to everyone who asks. Now, let me come back to the valley. Let me come back to the story, because there is more to tell, and the more is important. After the conversation with the turtle, as the weeks turned and the seasons shifted, and the valley slowly recalibrated to the new reality of a donkey who said no, sometimes something else began to happen. Something that the donkey hadn't anticipated, hadn't even dared to hope for. Because he had been so focused on the loss, on what it would cost to change, that he had even considered what it might gain. New animals began to come to him. Not the old ones who had relied on him out of habit and entitlement. New ones. Younger animals who were finding their way in the valley. Who had heard, because word travels even when you are not tracking it, that there was a donkey who was strong and helpful and willing, but who also had standards, who also had limits, who chose his collaborations rather than defaulting to everyone who asked. And that reputation, strangely, drew better people, or better animals. In this case, animals who came not to extract but to exchange. Animals who came not with demands but with respect. Because here is the thing about boundaries that sounds counterintuitive but is absolutely, demonstrably true. Having them makes you more appealing, not less. Not to everyone. Not to the takers and the users and the ones who want unlimited access to what you have, but to the givers, to the genuine ones, to the people who are themselves trying to build real relationships rather than useful arrangements to them. A person who knows their own worth is magnetic, because it tells them that when this person chooses to be with you, when this person gives you their time and their energy and their help, it is because they genuinely want to, not because they don't know how to say no. It tells you that you are chosen, and being chosen, actually chosen, freely, without compulsion, is one of the most beautiful feelings in the world. The young rabbit family came to the donkey with an idea. They needed help with their burrow repairs, and they knew the donkey was strong. But they also knew, from the new reputation that had settled around him, that they needed to come prepared. So they came with a plan. They had worked out exactly what needed doing and how many days it would take and what each of them could contribute. They had brought materials and tools, and they had thought carefully about how to make the work efficient. They presented this to the donkey not as a demand, but as a proposal. We're thinking of doing this. We'd love your help. Here, that's what we were offering in return. We help you with the maintenance of your shelter, which we noticed needs some attention. If this works for you, we'd be grateful. If not, we understand. The donkey looked at them, these small, careful creatures with their earnest faces and their prepared proposal, and he felt something in his chest that he had almost forgotten: warmth. Real warmth. The kind that comes not from being needed but from being respected. The kind that makes you want to help, not because you're afraid not to, but because the person asking is worth helping, because they've come to you as an equal, because they've acknowledged your limits and offered something in return and treated the whole exchange as what it actually is. A relationship between two parties who both matter. Yes, he said. And this yes felt nothing like the old yesies. This yes felt like sunrise. They worked together over several days. The rabbit family, despite being small, were organized and efficient and worked hard. And the donkey found himself enjoying the work in a way he hadn't in years, maybe ever. There was laughter. There were moments of problem solving where they all put their heads together and figured things out. There were breaks where they sat in the shade and shared food and talked about things other than the work, about the valley, about the seasons, about the things they had seen and hoped for and worried about. There was the texture of real company, of being with others, not as a service provider but as a companion. When the burrow was finished and the repairs were done and the young rabbits were bounding around the improved space with delight, the eldest rabbit came and stood before the donkey and said, simply, thank you. Not the automatic thank you of someone who expected what they received. The thank you of someone who knows they have received something that was freely chosen. The thank you that means, I see what you gave, and I know you didn't have to, and I am grateful. The donkey stood there in the evening light and felt that thank you land somewhere inside him. Somewhere that had been empty for a very long time. Somewhere that the automatic praise of the cow and the goat and all the others had never quite reached. And he understood, then, what the difference was. What had been missing all along. It wasn't more thanks or more praise or more recognition. It was truth. It was a real exchange. It was the knowledge that what he gave was chosen and that what he received was genuine. Understood, standing there by the rabbit's repaired burrow, that the problem had never been that he helped too much. The problem was that he helped the wrong ones in the wrong way for the wrong reasons. And that, changing who and why and how, had not made him less good. It had made him more. Now let me tell you something that I've been thinking about throughout this entire story. Something that I think is the deepest part of it. The layer underneath everything else. The root from which everything grows. The donkey's problem. And I don't mean to be reductive, because it is a complex and painful and deeply human thing. The donkey's problem was that he had confused being loved with being needed. He had confused relationship with usefulness, and this confusion, Tisquatan, is one of the most common and one of the most devastating ones that any of us make. Being needed feels like love. It mimics lo It has some of love's warmth, some of love's closeness, some of love's feeling of mattering. When someone needs you and you meet that need, there's a moment of connection, a moment of being important to someone, a moment of their attention being directed entirely at you. And that attention feels good. That attention can feel like love, especially if you haven't experienced much genuine love. Especially if you grew up in an environment where attention was scarce, where you had to earn it, where the way you got people to notice you was by being useful to them. And so you learn, not in words, not in a lesson, but in the quiet accumulation of experience, that the way to get love is to be needed. And so you make yourself needed. You make yourself indispensable. You make yourself the one who always says yes, who always shows up, who's always there. And it works in a shallow way. People come to you. People rely on you. People say they couldn't manage without you. And that feels close enough to love that you keep doing it. Keep giving. Keep saying yes. Keep emptying yourself. Because the alternative, stopping setting limits, becoming less available, feels like risking the loss of the only love you know how to receive. But what you're receiving is not love. It is need. And need and love are not the same thing. Need is about the other person. Love is about you. Need says, you are useful to me. Love says, you matter to me. Need says, I want what you can give. Love says, I want you, with or without what you can give. Need diminishes you. Love expands you. Need takes, laugives. Laugi. And the tragedy of the donkey, the tragedy of everyone who lives the donkey's life, is that in trying so hard to receive love by making themselves needed, they never create the conditions in which real love can exist. Because real love requires that you be seen. Real love requires that you be known. Real love requires that you have a self. A distinct, boundaried, genuine self, with preferences and limits and opinions, and the occasional no that another person can genuinely encounter and genuinely choose. You cannot love a mirror. You cannot love something that only reflects back what you want. You can only love something real, and realness requires limits. Realness requires edges. Realness requires the capacity to say no. The donkey, in his endless yeses, had made himself into a mirror. He had reflected back whatever was asked of him, and no one had fallen in love with the mirror. They had used it, and the donkey had wondered why. The turtle understood this. The turtle had seen it many times before, in many forms, in many creatures. And what he told the donkey was not, in the end, about strategy or self-protection, or how to manage relationships more efficiently. What he told the donkey was, in the deepest sense, about becoming real, about having the courage to be a self, not a service, about trusting that a self, a real, limited, imperfect, fully alive self, is more worth loving than any amount of availability or usefulness. That is a frightening thing to trust, especially if you have never had the experience of being loved for who you are rather than what you do. But it is the thing. It is the only thing that will actually work in the end. Back to the valley, back to the donkey and the turtle in the autumn light by the river. What about the ones who'd never come back? The donkey asked. The ones who've moved on to the next willing animal, the next yesayer. What about them? What about them? The turtle replied. Don't I owe them something? They relied on me. I was part of their routines. I was part of how their lives worked. Don't I have some responsibility to them? The turtle considered this. He took his time, as he always did, and the time was not wasted. You owe every living creature basin decency, he said finally. You owe them honesty. You owe them the respect of treating them as capable beings who can manage their own lives. You do not owe them your health. You do not owe them your limits. You do not owe them your whole self, at any cost, indefinitely, because they have grown accustomed to receiving it. Habit is not a debt. Their expectation of you is not an obligation. The fact that you have been giving something for a long time does not mean you are obliged to give it forever, especially when giving it is destroying you. The donkey was quiet. If you had a friend, the turtle continued, who had been giving you money for years, more than they could afford, because you needed it, and they never said no, And then one day they came to you and said, "I can't anymore. I'm struggling. I've been struggling for a long time and I should have said something sooner." Would you tell them they owed it to you to keep going? Would you tell them their debt to you outweighed their right to their own financial well-being? No, the donkey said immediately. Then why do you believe that you owe others what you cannot give without destroying yourself? The donkey had no answer, because there was no good answer. Because the belief was not logical. It had never been logical. It had been emotional. It had been fear. And in the light of the turtle's patient, steady attention, the fear was losing some of its power. "The ones who can only be in your life if you give them everything," the turtle said. "They will go and find another source, and that is their journey, not yours. And perhaps, if they are fortunate, they will eventually meet their own version of you, their own moment of reckoning, and they will learn what you are learning. Or perhaps they won't. That is not within your power to determine. Within your power is only yourself. Within your power is only the choice of how you live, and who you give your time and energy to, and how you want to show up in the world. That is the whole of it. That is Anuga. Weeks turned into months. The valley went through its seasons. The fierce heat of summer, the slow cooling of autumn, the gray and quiet of winter, the soft opening of spring. And through all of it, the donkey lived differently. Not perfectly. There were days when the guilt came back, when someone asked and he almost said yes out of habit, when the old patterns pulled at him. There were days when he helped someone and couldn't quite tell if it was genuine willingness or the old fear dressed up in new clothes. And those days he would sit with the question honestly, try to feel the difference, try to learn his own internal landscape more precisely. He made mistakes. He sometimes said no when he could have said yes, and missed a genuine opportunity for connection. He sometimes said yes when he should have said no, and felt the old emptiness afterward, and had to acknowledge it honestly rather than pretend it wasn't there. The learning was not linear. The learning was not clean. It was exactly as messy and imperfect and ongoing as all real learning is. But the direction was right, and the direction was enough. He became known, over time, as a different kind of helpful. The valley had always known him as the one who would do anything for anyone. Now they knew him as the one who helped when he helped. Genuinely and completely and wholeheartedly, but who also said no when he needed to, and whose no was calm and clear and not negotiable. And this version of the donkey attracted a different quality of relationship. Deeper, more honest, more mutual. Relationships in which he was not a service but a presence. Relationships in which he mattered, not just in the moment of being useful, but in the ordinary, quiet moments of just being there. The young ox became a friend. The rabbit family became companions. There were others too, a quiet old horse who had never asked for much, but was always glad to share the shade of the willow on warm afternoons. A family of ducks who brought color and noise to the valley and who appreciated the donkey for his steadiness, his solid presence, his reliability. Not the reliability of always saying yes, but the reliability of always being himself, consistent and honest and real. And the donkey discovered something that might be the most important thing in the whole story. The deepest truth of it. The one that took the longest to arrive, but that, once arrived, changed everything. He discovered that he had never needed the approval of all of them. He had never needed the praise of the cow and the goat and the sheep. He had never needed the gratitude of the monkey or the good opinion of the animals who had used him and moved on. Had needed all along what every living creature needs. Genuine connection, genuine love, the experience of being truly seen by another being, of mattering not for what you do, but for who you are. And that was available to him. It had always been available to him. He had just been looking for it in the wrong places, from the wrong animals, using the wrong method. He had been trying to buy it with labor when it could only be found through presence. He had been trying to earn it through usefulness when it could only be given and received freely, between beings who showed up for each other with their whole selves, not just their strong backs. Let me tell you something about boundaries, because I think the word has been used so much that it has started to lose its texture, started to feel like a buzzword, a trend, something you put in a caption or a self-help book rather than something you build in the real and difficult material of your actual life. A boundary is not a wall. I want to be very clear about this, because I think a lot of people When they first encounter the idea of boundaries, imagine that what is being suggested is a kind of closing off, a withdrawal, a building of walls between themselves and others to keep themselves safe. And while I understand why that image comes, it is not what a boundary actually is. A wall keeps everything out. It keeps the bad stuff out, yes, but it also keeps the good stuff out. It keeps the takers away, but it also keeps the givers away. A wall says, I don't trust the world. I don't trust people. I am not available to anyone. And that is not health. That is not wisdom. That is a different kind of problem. The problem of someone who has been hurt so much that they have decided the only safe position is complete isolation, and who is paying for that safety with loneliness. A boundary is different. A boundary is a line that you draw based on who you are and what you need and what you are able to give. It is not a wall because it has a gate. The gate opens for the people who respect the boundary, who come to you honestly, who treat you as a full human being with needs of your own. The gate stays closed for those who don't, for those who push and demand and take without asking, for those who see the boundary and try to move it rather than respect it. A boundary says, I am available, and here are the terms. Emye eneroase. And here are my limits. I care about others, and I also care about myself. And both of those things are true simultaneously, and neither one negates the other. A boundary is not selfishness. A boundary is the prerequisite for genuine giving, because you cannot give genuinely from a place of depletion. You can only give genuinely from a place of fullness. And to stay full, you need to know when you've given enough and allow yourself to stop. The donkey learned this. Not all at once, not without pain, but he learned it the way all real learning happens, through experience, through failure, through the long and unglamorous work of paying attention to himself and adjusting and trying again. And here is what he found at the end of all that learning. Here is what was waiting for him on the other side of all. Those difficult mornings and guilty afternoons and trembling nose and quiet evenings by the river. He found himself, not the performing self, the helpful self, the always available self, the self that existed to meet other people's needs. His actual self, the one underneath all of that, the one with opinions about the best path through the valley and preferences about which shade of morning light was most beautiful, and feelings about the changing of the seasons and thoughts about the turtle. S wisdom and the ox, S friendship and the river, S patience. The self that was not defined by what it could carry, and that self was worth finding. Now, you might be thinking, this is all well and good for a donkey in a story. But what about me? What about my actual life? With my actual relationships and my actual responsibilities, and the very real people who genuinely need me and whom I genuinely love? What about the times when saying no isn't just a matter of managing entitlement, but of genuinely difficult, competing demands? What about when the person asking is someone you care about, not someone exploiting you? And those are fair questions, important ones. Because the world is not only made of users and takers. Some of the people asking you for things genuinely need what they're asking for, and genuinely care about you. And the dynamic is not exploitative. It is just the ordinary challenge of being human and connected, and sometimes stretched in multiple directions at once. Here is what I would say to that. Even in the most loving, most mutual, most genuinely good relationships, boundaries matter. Even when you love someone completely, even when you are gladly committed to their well-being, even when you would happily carry things for them, your limits are still your limits. Your health is still your health. Your exhaustion is still your exhaustion. Love does not erase need. Love does not make depletion sustainable. Love does not mean you are obliged to give past the point of your own well-being. In fact, in a genuinely loving relationship, the person who loves you does not want you to destroy yourself for them. They don't want to receive help that costs you your health. They don't want your sacrifice. They want your presence, your wholeness, your genuine self. And so saying to someone you love, I can't today. I'm running low. I need to rest. That is not a failure of love. That is love of a different kind. Love that trusts the relationship enough to be honest in it. Love that knows the relationship can hold the truth. Love that believes, rightly, that a partnership between two whole, honest people is stronger than any arrangement based on one of them constantly over. The difference between a relationship that can hold your no and one that cannot is the difference between a relationship that has you fully in it and one that has a version of you that is performing giving for the sake of the relationship. Stability. The former is real. The latter is theater, and theater is exhausting, and it always eventually collapses. So yes, even with the people you love, especially with the people you love. Tell the truth about what you have and what you don't. Give what you can and say clearly when you can't. Trust that if the relationship is real, it can hold that. Trust that if you love each other genuinely, neither of you wants the other to disappear into service for the sake of the relationship. Trust the love enough to be real in it. Now, let me bring this all together, because we are coming toward the end of the story, and I want to make sure that what you carry away from it is worth carrying. The donkey began in a valley, strong and willing, helping everyone who asked and some who didn't. He believed that being useful would earn him love. He gave until he collapsed, literally, physically, in the dirt by the river. And still, no one stopped. He was walked past by the very animals whose lives he had been propping up. And in that moment of profound, quiet desolation, something in him finally broke. Not broke in the way of destruction, broke in the way of a shell breaking to let something out. Broke in the way that sometimes things need to break before they can become what they were always meant to be. He met the turtle. He heard the truth. He tried saying no, and it was hard. And some things ended, and some things changed, and the valley shifted around him. He found that the ones who stayed were the ones worth having. He found new relationships, honest and mutual. He found himself, his actual, genuine, boundaried, real self. And he found, in the end, that this self was more worth knowing than the useful shadow he had been performing. That is the arc. That is the shape of it. And the shape is a shape you might recognize. The shape of someone who finally, after a very long time, stops confusing love with labor, stops confusing worth with usefulness, stops confusing kindness with self-destruction, and starts, slowly, painfully, beautifully, becoming real. So here is what I want to leave you with. Here are the things that are worth keeping from this story. Help is good. It is one of the best things humans and donkeys are capable of. It is the thing that knits us together, that makes communities real, that transforms strangers into neighbors and neighbors into friends. Help is beautiful and it matters, and the world needs more of it, not less. But help without limits is not sustainable. Help without self-respect is not kindness. It is self-harm with a friendly face, and the world does not need more of that. The world needs help that comes from fullness, that is freely chosen, that is given by people who have enough themselves to genuinely share. That kind of help, chosen help, boundaried help, honest help, is worth 1,000 times more than the help extracted from someone who doesn't know how to say no. You are not selfish for having limits. You are not unkind for saying no. You are not a bad person for protecting your energy. You are a living creature with finite resources and the right to manage them wisely. Wisdom is not selfishness. Selfie knowledge is not. And the ability to say no, clearly, calmly, without guilt, and without apology, is one of the most generous things you can do. Because it means that when you say yes, everyone around you knows it is real. The people who respect you will stay when you set limits. The people who leave when you set limits were only there for what you could give. And you are worth more than that. You deserve more than that. Not someday. Not once you've fixed everything about yourself that doesn't feel quite right. Not once. You've earned it through enough sacrifice or service or proving now. Right now. As you are, tired and imperfect, and learning and still here, you deserve to be loved for that, not in spite of it. Stop helping those who take without care. Stop saying yes when your whole self is saying no. Start protecting your energy the way you would protect anything precious. Because your energy is precious. It is quite literally your life. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Start choosing your yeses. Make them mean something. Let them be gifts rather than obligations. And one more thing. One last thing, because I think it's the most important one. The donkey, at the end of the story, was not alone. He was better connected than he had ever been to fewer animals. But genuinely, he had the ox and the rabbits and the horse and the turtle and the ducks. And those few were worth all the many who had used him and moved on. One person who truly sees you, one person who shows up not because they need you, but because they want you. Because they find your company good, and your presence valuable, and your realness a gift. One person. Like that is worth more than 1,000 who use you. One real, genuine, mutual connection. One relationship in which you are fully seen and fully valued. In which you can be honest and receive honesty back. In which you can say no and know the relationship can hold it. In which your presence is a gift rather than a service. One of those, just one, is worth everything. So if you've been living the donkey's life, if you've been helping everyone and feeling invisible, if you've been saying yes until your legs shake and your back aches and your spirit is hollow, if you've been waiting for the world to notice how much you give and reward you with the love you've been working so hard to earn, 10 here tease. The love you are looking for cannot be earned. It can only be found in the right places, with the right people, when you are willing to be real. And being real starts with a single word. The shortest one, the hardest one, the most important one. Don't know, don't just it. Just once. Just try it, and see what falls away, and see what stays, and see what grows in the space that opens up when you finally put down the weight you've been carrying for far too long. You are not a donkey. You are not a service. You are not defined by your usefulness. You are a complete, whole, irreplaceable, entirely worthy human being. And the world needs your full presence, not your hollowed out performance of endless giving. Start there. Start with that. Start with knowing, all the way down, that your worth is not contingent on your availability. And let everything else, the relationships, the boundaries, the yeses and the nos, let all of it flow from that one true, unshakable beginning point. Because when you know your worth, when you really know it, when it lives in your bones, and not just your head, your help becomes a gift, your presence becomes a treasure. Your yes becomes an event, and the people who are lucky enough to receive it will know exactly how lucky they are. That is the lesson. That is the story. That is what a donkey in a valley taught himself, with a little help from an old turtle and a lot of years of learning the hard way. Go and be real, go and have limits. Go and help the ones who are worth helping and say no to the ones who are not. Go and rest when you are tired and speak when you are hurting and choose the people who choose you back. And if this story has spoken to something in you, if it has put words to something you've been carrying but couldn't name, then pass it on. Give it to someone who needs it. Because there are donkeys in every valley, in every family, in every workplace, in every friendship group, and every one of them deserves to hear this. Every one of them deserves to know that their exhaustion is not a virtue, that their collapse is not strength, that saying no is not betrayal, that they deserve, actually deserve, without having to earn it, to be loved for who they are and not what they carry. Share this with the person who always says yes. Share it with the person who is always the first to offer and the last to receive. Share it with a person who seems fine, who is always helping, who you've never once seen rest because they might not be fine. They might be by the river, breathing hard, with no one stopping to ask if they're all right. Stop for them, ask, see them, dot, and choose boundaries. Not because boundaries are trendy, not because someone told you to, but because you understand now. You really, truly understand that your kindness is only as powerful as the selfhood behind it, and your selfhood deserves to be whole. Your kindness is powerful. Use it wisely. Use it from fullness. Use it from choice, and protect it fiercely, tenderly, unapologetically, so that it is always there when you need it, and always real. When you give it, that is the end of the story. That is the beginning of something else. And whatever happens next, wherever this finds you, whatever valley you are standing in, whatever loads you are carrying, Whatever question has been growing quietly in your chest, I hope you hear this. You are not invisible. You are seen, and you are worth so much more than what you carry. Now go rest. Your time is coming. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.